Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on what time zone you're in. Good evening. Thanks for joining so much. So this is a Being Tea guest interview. We try to do these once a month with different folks in the tea industry who I know personally, they're some of my closest friends, or they're just really good people that I feel like if you're looking to learn about tea and looking for more resources and people to connect to, these are some really good folks that I feel like you should get to know. So the guest interview program, if this is your first time joining us for one of these, is supported by the members of my online tea education program. So I run an online program at patreon.com/beingtea. That's where you can find tea classes from me every single month. We do new classes, new topics, both in tea skills and in tea meditation. And members also have access to a whole library of different classes. There's a few dozen classes in there now. And so thanks to the support of the members who join every month, we're able to bring this guest interview program for you to enjoy. So our guest today is the Renegade tea farmers from Georgia in Europe. And I have been in love with their story since last year when they ran their Indiegogo campaign to get their project started, which they're going to explain to us today what that was about. I know in the US here, it definitely made a really big impact. I knew a lot of people who were talking about it, buying tea from the campaign, sharing it. For me, one of the most memorable parts of when the campaign was getting started was this video that they shared on Instagram of them pulling up all the ferns and cleaning out this old abandoned tea garden. And it was like sped up footage. And I'm just watching them go. And I'm like, oh my God, these guys are awesome. This is so cool. And so since then, I've been buying their teas and sharing them in workshops. And they're just lovely. They're so absolutely delicious. It's such an inspiring project. So I'm really happy to welcome them here today. I'm going to send a link over right now. And so that we can get Miina up on screen and introduce her to you guys. So currently the Renegade team is about 7 different people. And they don't live in Georgia full time. So as Miina will explain, the season for growing Georgian tea is actually only half the year. So the rest of the time, these lovely folks are in Estonia. Hi, Miina.
Hello. Thank you for inviting, and thank you for the great introduction as well.
Yeah. So where are you right now?
I'm actually in the house that we are all living. We are all living together as well in one big house. So I'm here at the moment because in Georgia it's 9 o'clock in the evening already. So it's getting kind of late already. So working day is done for now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So share a little bit of background of your story. I know that most of you guys were friends when you got this project started. How did you come together and decide that you wanted to do some tea?
Well, actually, we were all working together in the same company, doing different things. But at some point, it just kind of felt for all of us that we want to do something else. And working together was something that we felt very convenient in, and we really liked it. So we decided that we will start doing it in the future as well. But it wasn't so that we went to a lunch break and decided that like tomorrow we're all going. It wasn't like that at all. It was because some people now they're asking if the company is still doing well. Yes, this company is doing great, and the whole project was about 1 year or year and a half for us to leave the current jobs and move our things to here, Georgia.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But this working together, sorry. This working together, this definitely has helped us quite a lot. So we know what all of us know the best, what are our strengths and weaknesses, so to say, and this has really played very well for us.
I can imagine too, especially with something that is, so completely new. I mean, none of you had experience, obviously, as tea farmers. You're just kind of doing this. So you need some familiarity with your co-workers in that.
Yeah, well, in this sense, this is the only thing that we have known in this project. We know each other, and this is the only thing that we know for sure. All the rest of it is just a lot of testing and learning a lot of failing and then succeeding and so on. So yeah.
One of the things I love a lot about your project, I read this in one of your posts recently, was, of course, this wasn't literally like hatched as an idea of like, we're going to go make tea. It was kind of, you discovered that along the way that you wanted to do that. And I think that fits in so much with things I hear in the US with young people who want to go into farming. Like that's something that we hadn't seen in generations, was people wanting to go back to the land because they want to do something with their hands. They want to be active with nature and they want to make a difference in the environment. And that was entirely what your idea was. That's what you wanted to do. That's so exciting.
Yeah, because none of us were a farmer before. We also didn't actually know much about tea. All of us drank tea from time to time, but definitely not in a way that you would actually put your mind to it. Or I didn't even know that black and green tea come from the same plant. I had never actually given thought about the fact that the thing that is in your tea package, that it comes from somewhere. I just never thought about it at all. So the fact that we're now doing tea in Georgia is like a bunch of small coincidences that just came together, because the initial idea was just to do something with our hands. So it was maybe an olive garden, maybe coffee, maybe winery, maybe tea. So at some point, just this tea in Georgia stumbled upon us, I think, and here we are. And now we really like tea. And now I know that tea plant is one plant, and you can make green, white, and blue from it.
So you heard that I guess the Georgian government was starting a program or looking at a program that was going to rehabilitate these abandoned gardens, and that was the connection of, oh, maybe we could do something there. Is that right?
Basically, yes. Well, it all started when my colleague Hannes found a package of Georgian tea in his parents' house. Because in the Soviet times, so 30, 40 years ago, whole Soviet Union drank only Georgian tea. All the tea came from Georgia. It wasn't necessarily the best quality tea because Soviet Union needed a lot, but this is all they had at the time. So since we are all also from a former Soviet Union countries, I am too young for it, but my parents as well, for example, drank Georgian tea a lot in the past. So now when Hannes found this package of Georgian tea, then he got kind of intrigued about it, started to search a little bit what has happened to Georgian tea, because no one knows about Georgian tea. And then he figured out that basically nothing is happening with Georgian tea. And then we stumbled upon this government project as well, and there it kind of just started to roll out.
That's wonderful. Do you? What are your experiences working with some of the local folks in Georgia? Like, as you say, like quite a few of you are one generation removed from growing up in the Soviet Union, so you're interacting with a little bit of a different demographic. And what's that like? What do they think of you guys coming over to work in these gardens again?
Well, they definitely think that we are crazy, but I hope that like good kind of crazy. Because overall, what we have learned and what I believe is that at the moment, for all those people who live in the countryside, they haven't had stable jobs for the last 30 years. So having a stable office job like we actually had in Estonia is like a dream. You have a job, you have a coffee maker, you have your Excel tables, everything. So the fact that we left this seemingly amazing dream life of a corporate job and switched it into plucking fern from the field, and now we're very happy about it. This definitely for them was a little bit of a interesting thing. And also, since the main in the countryside, at least Georgia in this sense is very different if you talk about Tbilisi, for example, or Batumi, that are bigger cities. But the countryside that we are dealing with the most is still work culture-wise. I think since the last stable way of working was from the Soviet times. So the memory of how things should be done is from that time. So big boss should be a big boss. They should go around with a suit and just be very important. But instead of that, we have decided that we will also build fences. We are plucking tea. We are pulling out fern, we are doing everything. And this definitely for them is also a little bit of a weird thing. And I think that maybe some of those people still believe that somewhere there is a bigger boss, that it cannot be so that
Surely there's a bigger boss in an office somewhere.
Surely there must be, because the big bosses cannot work on their own. So this definitely has been interesting. But I think that since we are doing so much field work ourselves as well, this has really helped us to connect with the local people more. So I think that even if they do think right now that we are crazy, they know that we are good kind of crazy, and we're actually good human beings and all this. Because in the beginning, of course, it was difficult. There was a lot of testing the limits of us and seeing what it actually is like. Because also, if you have lived in Georgian countryside for 30 years, no one has done anything, nothing. And then there's a bunch of crazy Europeans coming and starting who knows what in the middle of nowhere. So this also is quite the weird thing. So what they did in the beginning, which is quite logical actually, I would say, is that they tested quite a lot, like how stupid we actually are and how much money we actually would have and all those things, which in the beginning was difficult. But right now I understand it quite well why they did it, and at the moment I'm really happy that we have a bunch of very nice people working for us that we can talk with, and we actually get together and understand each other better in this sense. So
yeah, it's a trust building that has to happen.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if you would live in a village, no one has done anything for 30 years, and now there's this weird European guy and tells you that you have to start, I don't know, building fences and barns and so on. It must be weird.
Of course.
No one has done anything, and now here they come asking for many things. So it was definitely a challenge, because also ideally, as I said, for the last 30 years they haven't had jobs. So the idea was that there are a lot of people living in the villages and they would be really happy to work, which is on one hand it's true, but on the second hand, if you haven't had a stable job for 30 years and now there is someone who says that you should come to work even if maybe your mood is not the best or neighbor had a birthday, then this is definitely something that takes getting used to. But I think that now we are meeting somewhere in the middle, so that they are more getting used to the stability in this sense that we are there. There is always a place where you can work, and we, on the other hand, are more understanding about the fact that if there is neighbor's birthday, then maybe it's not needed to work.
Yeah. Wow. So have they had a chance to try some of the teas? Like, what do they think of your teas?
I haven't really done like a very basic tea tasting with them, but they are very interested about it, because the last tea making was in the Soviet time, and then the procedure was very technical and very quantity oriented. So there were those huge factories and the huge trucks. The place where we are having the factory at the moment, actually in the Soviet time, was just a tiny warehouse for the tea. So for us, it's a big factory. In the Soviet time, it was just a tiny room to keep leaves for a little while. So the technique was definitely different. So now it's very interesting for them to see how we are actually doing things, and it definitely has given us some weird looks, and sometimes they're like, okay. But because we're doing all by hand plucking and all those things, and hand weeding the full organic thing, which is well, in Soviet times no one knew about organic tea, no one thought about it. This was not something that you would put some effort into. So yeah, they're definitely interested, and it's different, but yeah, I don't know. They still do like to drink their own tea as well, because some people in here, they actually make their tea on their own as well. They have small tea gardens, and then they make some of their own as well.
I've heard that as kind of a common story when when you're comparing the people locally in an area, the type of tea that they drink and what they consider like the daily staple in the kitchen, versus the product that is sold and exported. And especially if they have never had exposure to other markets and seen other styles of tea. Like they've never seen white tea before. They have no idea why the leaves aren't, in a different shape.
Yeah.
It's all very new to them. So they're like, okay, I trust that this is going to get sold and you guys will take care of that, but I'm going to have my tea.
Yeah, basically it is like that. Because also what is different if you compare Georgian tea culture, for example, with, I don't know, China, India, those places, then in Georgia, tea has always been a very technical thing. It has always been brought in by the Russians, first by the Russian Empire, then later by the Soviet Union. So the production was always very quantity oriented. It was not really something that, in Soviet time, for example, they didn't actually drink much of the tea at all. It was all exported away. So they themselves actually didn't consume much of it at all. So as far as I know and what we have seen, I wouldn't say that tea for the local people is something very meaningful. It's just a drink that you drink. It's like water or juice or whatever. So this definitely gives a different perspective to it overall.
Yeah, it's similar with coffee too. There's very few places where it's really considered part of the culture. The rest of it's a crop they grow. And it doesn't mean that they don't care about it. It's just, it's not culture to them. It's not like identity, I guess, in that way.
Yes, I think so. It's very different for them. The whole idea of it, and especially as the artisan type of tea that we are making at the moment, because it seems that this has never really been a focus point in here before. So this is something new.
Where do you notice most of the interest in your teas coming from? Like in terms of people buying it or talking about it, or?
Well, since 6 of us are from Estonia, and Estonia is a really, really small country, the main part is still coming from Estonia because people just know us the most in there.
Right, you're able to have the campaign of word of mouth and tell everybody.
Yeah, I think that at least 1/3 of the people who supported us in this Indiegogo campaign were our like friends or former colleagues or relatives and people like that, which has been really helpful for us for sure. But what we are actually really happy about is the fact that after Estonia, there is actually the United States, which is very yay for us because in there we don't because in there we don't really have that many friends. So this is great that people in there have been taking notice of us as well. Also, Netherlands is a very big supporting country of ours. Yeah, somehow in the very beginning of this Indiegogo campaign, we gathered a really lovely round of people from Netherlands, and now Estonia, United States, Lithuania, as Thomas is from Lithuania, and Netherlands are the main markets, I would say, or the main places that interest comes from. But yeah, there's a lot of, there has been like Indonesia and Australia and basically all over the place, but Northern Europe and United States mostly.
That's great.
Which I guess they are the countries that are moving towards appreciating this farm to table kind of an approach and this buying straight from the farmer and organic things and so on. So this is kind of logical in this sense that, for example, Georgian market is not really our home market at the moment.
Yeah. No, I mean that's really incredible that you're hitting that popularity in some of the places where that style, like you say, like farm to table, we're so much more interested in not only where our teas come from, but the stories of them and the details now. And anybody who provides that, like I know a number of folks have mentioned on this before too, like the information that's on your packaging is so great. If anybody hasn't seen what some of the details are. So for example, there's like a little description of each tea, and all of them have different names, which is so cool. And often the names are like a reflection of the quality of it, or something that was noticed when you were making it. It explains all the steps of how the tea was made so that it was the plucking standard. So it was 2 leaves in a bud, or if it was just buds, how long it was withered, oxidized, how many times it was rolled, how it was dried, the temperature that's done. Like, it's not so much that it's just factual details that are so fascinating, because without the context, those don't matter. And you guys provide the context, and I love that. Like your blog content, how you explain the story of what you're doing and how each batch of tea feels different. it's really educating people on what it's like to make tea. And I think that that's what folks are responding to.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it seems that people are liking this a lot. For us, it's just a matter of learning together with the people that are drinking our teas. And since we are testing with the tea recipes, for example, quite a lot as well, we didn't really feel that this is some big company's secret that we couldn't share. And on the other hand, I think that this really gives a better insight on how actually it happens that there is a bush somewhere in Georgia and now it's in your cup and you can drink tea. That there are actually quite a lot of steps in between and what it actually takes. Because as I said in the beginning, I 2 years ago didn't think for a second how tea comes. It just didn't matter to me. So what we are hoping to do a little bit with the packaging and our story sharing is that maybe some people can relate to this background, and next time when they're drinking tea, they can think a little bit more about how it was done and who made it, and how is it that the bush in Georgia ends up in your teacup.
Mm-hmm. And I think the level of detail making it so micro, like you even put how much tea it took, fresh leaves, and what that yielded. So this one
takes a lot.
This one's like almost 20 kg and it yielded just under 5 kg. You know, that kind of fact, like a lot of people don't understand how much leaf it takes to just make a small amount of tea.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and to gather 20 kilos of tea with these 2 leaves and the bud by hand, this is a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
It is. So it's like a day's worth of work for 5, 6, 7 ladies that are working in our plantation when we do the plucking days. So this is as well something that we would like to share, and we would like people to maybe understand more and just to give them the possibility, because in many cases you don't even have the possibility to get this information, because if you buy tea from a supermarket, for example, it can easily, in Europe, it can easily say that the tea was made in Germany, for example. Germany doesn't have tea bushes, so what
they do the blending, handling, and
yeah. So what do you really know about the tea in this case? So what we are hoping to do is connect people a little bit more, maybe with the tea, and also maybe introduce it a little bit more to the common people, so to say, like the people who don't necessarily drink tea as a separate event, but for those people who just like to casually here and there have a cup, and so that they would also maybe appreciate it a little bit more, or like put some thought into it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One of the other things too that strikes me about sharing those kind of granular details is something that folks are often not aware of, is that every single batch is different, even for the most experienced tea makers. Like one of my favorite producers in Nepal, when I visited them, they keep like a big ledger of every batch of tea, all of the details that they did that day, and the notes from it. And they've been doing that since they started their garden over a decade ago. You know, every batch is different. And I love that you respond to that by, all of these have different names. All of them have a different amount that's available. And that's it. Like, it's just this, and you can't get it again. And that's like a really great insight for people who are trying to understand tea, to enjoy it while it's there. Yeah,
it's a little bit like recently we have started to think about maybe like single malt whiskey, that sometimes it is what it is, and exactly the lazy morning that you're drinking at the moment, next year maybe there is another lazy morning, maybe the recipe is the same, and maybe the taste is almost the same as well, but it never will be exactly the same, because there's so many things that impact the taste of tea, from the weather outside, is it raining, is it not raining, what's the moisture level in the air, in the factory, the plucking standard, so on. So there's so many small things, and this is something that we are actually learning a lot as well. In the beginning, I remember when we had last summer, we had a teacher from Nepal who actually helped us a little bit to understand what's happening with the tea. So when he came, we actually were hoping that he will come and tell us that, all right, guys, now you start to make tea. There's this, and that you have to do, and that's it. but he didn't. He told us that.
Sorry, no quick answers.
Yep, he told us that matter of fact is that you always have to start figuring it out again. Every time when the leaves come into the factory, you have to look at them and kind of feel what they want. So this, in the beginning, it was very confusing, and some of us were actually quite terrified about it because it's quite daunting task if you think of it in the beginning.
You're like, is it always going to be this way?
Yeah, exactly. And we were hoping that at least this super smart Nepalese guy will give us a decent recipe, but he didn't. He refused to give us a golden recipe. But then we sat on it a little bit and then figured out that all you can actually do is just test a lot and see what comes out. And we are actually really happy that this year we only have about 15 to 20 teas, I think. Last year we had 42, which was...
you had a huge amount.
Yeah, and each of the teas we had like a kilo maybe or two, because last summer was only testing. We had zero idea what we were actually doing. But every time that we tested, then you again know something else. So we're evolving quite a lot in this sense. And this year we already almost understand how it should be done, but it's still almost. It's when we start to think that okay, I got it, it's good, then something out of nowhere comes and we're again sitting behind the table and scratching our heads and do not understand how a lazy morning from yesterday is so different from lazy morning from last week.
Right.
You just don't know.
It's kind of like baking, like the environment of a bakery is a very carefully contained environment of like humidity and temperature. And if you make sourdough, like the yeast that are in the air and everything, and it changes all the time. It's a living thing and you have to respond to that. And I love that you shared all of your tests with us with all these teas, because that's such a fascinating look at this is how it comes together.
Well, there are still some that we didn't share. Some of them came out so terribly.
If they came out bad, what were some things that that you noticed when they came out bad?
There are so many things that can go bad. Because in last year, I remember, well, there are some outside things that can happen because, well, we just built our factory last year. So we put the electricity and water systems in there. So if the electricity goes out in the middle of the night when the tea is supposed to be withering or oxidizing, then it kind of messes it up.
Yes.
And sometimes you just cannot save it. But on the other times, you think that it went really bad, but actually it comes out really nice. Because some teas, I think that we have like actually thrown away maybe 1 or 2 batches, not more. Some of them are still standing somewhere in our cabins, and we're thinking what to do with them. But sometimes it also comes out that during the process, you think that it's gone, it's nothing to do with it. But then we still give it a little taste when it's done. And sometimes it happens that those, so to say, failures, they come out as the best teas ever. So, yeah. But then it also gets tricky because when at the moment, I know Thomas is a little bit confused about the black tea that he made. That was that he initially thought it will go bad anyway. So he just did a random bunch of things with them, didn't write down. So now it came out that it's the best tea ever.
Uh-oh.
But he doesn't know how he made it. So now we're trying to figure it out and get the taste back. So far, no luck yet, but we keep on trying.
Yeah. I think the ones that didn't work out, you could always use that as a workshop, as a teaching experience. Like, I know that it's something that tea professionals, we get kind of nerdy about. Like, I remember once I was doing this this tea competition, and we had a set of judges who we all had really different backgrounds. And there's a person who was from Kenya and had worked in CTC production. And we had this really funky black tea. Oh my gosh, like there was something wrong with it. And he smells the leaves and he immediately is like, oh, the machine wasn't clean between the runs. And we're like, oh, that's the coolest thing ever, that you could tell that from the taste. And so like we get really nerdy about tasting things where something went wrong as an educational experience. So, maybe make a workshop of it.
Maybe we should. Maybe we should.
Oh, I
Usually the wrong
bet you
thing.
would have people who would love to do that.
Yeah, and I think that in the future as well, we will always have those messed up batches as well, because what we have promised to ourselves actually is that even if we at some point figure out like some base recipes, like we know how to make decent black or green or oolong tea, that we always will keep on testing. So, and always testing means that sometimes there are failures as well. So I think that there will always be some bad renegade teas as well.
That's cool.
But if
Actually,
they're
I
really
think
bad,
it's exciting. I mean, it's funny
Yeah,
because
but-
sometimes when you're trying to put together a workshop to teach that, no tea producer will do that. They won't give you any tea that is not made correctly because they don't want to look bad. And we're like, no, it's not presented. It's like, we would share your good teas, of course, too. It's like the education of what happens in the factory. But yeah, I think it'd be really fun.
this actually could be a really good idea. We should think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why not? Because this is something that we also, this sharing our story and the idea that even if something goes bad, even if the test doesn't go well, or even if the days in here, sometimes it is rough as well to start a tea farm from zero and be in a foreign place. So even if things get a little bit difficult, we always have at least tried to share this part as well, so that it wouldn't seem from the outside world that it's like all dances and flowers and life is great. Ditch your work and start the farm. It's easy breezy. It's not. It takes a lot of work. So we are really trying to share the difficulties as well, so that we could have this honest relationship with the people that are drinking our teas, and they would know us the best that they can. But of course, it's always difficult. You always want to show your best side. So
Yeah.
it's not easy to show the difficult parts as well.
No, it's not. But I think it's super appreciated because people do have a very, especially in the U.S., like a very romanticized view of tea, which is okay. Like, tea is a beautiful product. It's a beautiful life. It's one of the best things, I believe, that you could be involved in producing and selling and sharing. But it's not like eating cake all the time. Like, it is work. And so trying to understand what the work is, I think is helpful for people.
Yeah. This is why I was really happy when you reminded us for this about this fern plucking video that we did last year. Oh, such fun times.
I loved that. That was so kick-ass. It was just really, also your description of how, when you're trying to find the gardens to go visit and see if you might be interested to, work with that one, you were trying to find them on Google Map, because there's no directions really how to get to these places. You're just looking at the Google satellite photo and you can't see it because it's just covered in fern. And when you start to recognize the fern means that's where tea is.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
This is how we found our plantations as well. A lot of Google Maps traveling. So first we went through Google Maps. We went to Georgia in Google Maps, and then we started to drive actually around in here, which was a lot of fun. So thank you, Google Maps. Probably we wouldn't be here without
it. That's so funny. We've had a bunch of people join since we started, so I just want to remind everyone, if you have a question at any point, feel free to type in the little chat and just let us know as we're going. So one thing I wanted to ask you, Miina, like, are there origins or styles of tea that you really look to as your inspiration when you were getting started? Like, knowing kind of the character of what the Georgian flavor is, that it's fragrant and it's lighter body and it's a little bit more on the delicate side. What other teas inspired you when you were saying, okay, this might work here?
It's difficult to say in this sense, because as I told before, we actually weren't that deep into tea. So we weren't really able to compare our teas with anything. So now we are actually quite excited if people can tell us what could we compare it with, because we don't know. The only thing that we actually are going after, or at least what we started out with, was that we want to do the tea that we would enjoy and that we would like. So this is basically the only thing that we went by. And this the thing that Georgian tea actually is quite delicate and very sweet and aromatic in this sense. This is also something that we actually kind of figured out along the way. But but it has always been for us that we want to make tea that we would actually enjoy ourselves, and then if people like it and if they can compare it with anything else, then it's great. But we actually haven't had any like specific role models in the world in this sense that we would want to make like Darjeeling type of black tea or something. But people
That's
have
really interesting.
Yeah, people have been telling now that our black teas are a little bit like Darjeeling type of things, but
Oh, very much like Darjeeling or Nepal. Like there's just this softness and this kind of creaminess, and the floral. It's just beautiful. Like, and I think in one of your blog posts too, one of your fellow renegades mentioned about black tea that surprises you because you had this idea of what black tea is, and then you taste this, and it's like, oh, like this is actually quite different. And I love that because black tea, there is such an idea of that it's supposed to be like a breakfast style kind of thing. And then when you have something that's just so like deep and aromatic and just really, really wonderful, like it's very surprising. I think it's a great introduction to black tea.
Yeah, it's most of us actually weren't that big of fans of black tea in the beginning because we had all this idea that black tea is very almost bitter, astringent, and that you have to add milk and sugar to it basically. But then we started to discover more about Georgian black tea and made the tests ourselves as well. And we were actually quite surprised. And now I actually enjoy black tea the most, I think. Oolongs as well. Oolongs are my new love as well.
Yes.
But,
yes.
But the thing with those black teas is that it's for those people who really want those very strong black teas. For those people, our black teas are maybe a little bit of a disappointment sometimes. But those people who would actually like it, they are a little bit afraid to order it because they think that black tea is very bitter. But so we're trying to do a lot of convincing to the people who actually are not necessarily the black tea lovers that they should give it a try and just see, because I believe that Georgian black tea is something that can surprise many people in this sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've shared your teas at a bunch of workshops too. And I usually don't say up front where the teas come from. I like to do a lot of blind tasting and just have people describe. And then afterward, we talk about where they come from and how they're made. So yeah, folks, get some black teas and write some reviews and tag Renegade, because we need more people to know about like that these teas are just, especially the black teas are they're so lovely. Like this one is called Banana Rama. It's called that because it smells like ripe bananas. And it's just
it does, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Initially, the name actually came from the processing of it, because if you wither the tea leaves, then they start to smell like banana most of the time. So this was one of the first teas that we did last year. So then it was this discovering Heureka that, wow, it does taste like banana, like very sweet banana. And this one actually keeps the smell of banana alive, even if it's done already.
So your growing season is because you're located in one of the furthest north places that tea can be grown. And so your growing season is like roughly May to October?
Basically, yes. We're finishing up at the moment. So I think that the last plucking round will be in the end of September, maybe first days of October as well. But then we're basically done. So in this sense as well, Georgia is actually quite an interesting place. As you said, it's the most northern part that you can grow tea in such quantities. But this gives the tea plant some resting time. So basically, there's almost 6 months for the tea plant to gather strength and to rest from the tiring season. And also there are a couple of weeks of snow and -degrees, which is actually really good for the tea plants, that all those pests and different diseases that the tea plants might have, they will actually die during the winter time. So that's why we actually don't even need to use any different kind of pesticides and things like that. That in those warmer countries where you can produce all year round, they have a lot of problems with those different diseases and different bugs and so on. But in here, luckily, we are free of that. We only have to deal with fern.
Oh, fern.
Oh, yeah. Fern and cows, the best friends of ours.
So what kind of work are you all doing in the off season then when you go back home to Estonia? What are you working on?
There's still a lot of tea things to do because sales-wise, actually, winter time is the main part of this tea business. So we're actually like figuring it out at the moment what what will happen. But yeah, at least half of the time we are still all dealing with the tea thing, and then the other half is filled with different project things and so on. But each of us are doing different things. I'm doing waitressing, for example. I like it.
It's nice to have something that's very different in the off time to kind of reset your brain.
It switches it up, and I'm actually the type of person, I really actually enjoy the fact that life is, so to say, switching around quite a bit, so it doesn't get boring ever. Although in Georgia it could never get boring, but it's good to have some variety as well, I suppose.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see too, because it's still a bit unusual to have somebody who is both the producer as well as the seller of their own tea. So to see which times of the year you generally sell the most of your tea, compared to when you're actually producing it, because it's interesting that people can buy it while you're producing it and get it super, super fresh, but it's just not the time of year when people are really buying tea. They want to buy it later. So you kind of have to be prepared for that wintertime rush.
Yeah, well, we're very excited to see what will happen this winter, because last year was our first production year. So then we only made altogether 100 kilos of tea, which
That's
actually
still
is
a
not
lot
that.
of tea. I don't know. I think it's a lot of tea.
Well,
for
it was,
year.
but it fitted quite well in our living room, so it was not that much. It's about like 20 boxes or something.
Yeah.
And half of it we actually sold before we even made it with this crowdfunding campaign.
Right.
So sales-wise, last year was definitely easier because the amounts were smaller. So we're quite interested to see what will happen this year, because this year we have 500 kilos about. So we have a bit more.
Nice.
But of course, we also have a lot more friends this year, and we have worked quite hard to get there. So we'll see. I'm very excited to see what the winter brings for us, and if it's. We have had those discussions in here as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if all of the tea would be out by the end of the year, but also I wouldn't be that surprised if there would be still a lot of it left. I just don't know. All of us are like nervously expecting and waiting what will happen and how it will turn out, because so far we actually don't know if our problem might be that we are not able to produce as much, or our problem will be that we are not able to sell enough. So we will see. This year for us definitely is like a very interesting time to see what will happen and how will it go.
So I know that you kind of, by nature of where you're located and how much tea can be grown and everything, you're in one of the blog posts it mentioned like the scale for Georgian tea, especially made this way, is never going to be huge, right? It's always going to be very kind of small. But what sort of ideas do you have for new business with the tea? Like, or would you be interested to work with some cafes for wholesale or like small quantities?
We definitely, and we are actually working on it a little bit as well, but it's a little bit of like two and sword with that for us, so to say, because one of our main things that we from the very beginning have been thinking about, and what we consider as like one of the main things about our business, is that we really like the fact that we can communicate with all the people who buy our teas like straight, so that if a person buys the tea, then for example me or Priit will package it, and I will know who it is who is buying it. If they have any questions, then they can write straight back to us. And if you put different shops or cafes in between, then it kind of a little bit gets in the way. But also, of course, there are a lot of very nice shops and restaurants that we are already talking. And as long as those places know our story, and they actually, at least this restaurant or the shop knows us and is interested in sharing the story as well, then we are actually quite up to it. But it's a tricky way of balancing, because from the beginning we have been fighting with this system of middlemen and so on in the tea industry. So now, if we would put our teas to, I don't know, some supermarket shelves, then it would kind of be like talking back against us.
Oh, goodness, no. Yeah. You need folks who will share the story, who will put your name on it, like have it on the menu as a Renegade tea, lazy morning, Bananarama, like not try to sweep that away and then just say, oh, it's Georgian tea, or that's it. Like, you really need your identity on that, because that's the way that makes it sustainable, is if people that know it came from you and they can get in touch with you and learn more.
Yeah, that it was actually like in the package, it's always written who made it. Usually it's Thomas or Hannes. They are our tea makers. So if you like the tea, then you can write to Hannes or Thomas that you really liked it. If you didn't, you can also tell. So
you're open to all feedback.
We definitely, and actually this is very true. We are, so far we haven't had a lot of negative feedback. Some, of course, but we are actually very much looking forward to all kinds of feedback, because we are testing so much, and we cannot improve if we don't know. So if there is something that is off, then we would really actually appreciate help as well, because it's always, if everyone is always saying that you're doing a great job and everything is so awesome, then it's quite difficult to evolve from that. It's always a lot easier if you have some good criticism as well that you can work with.
Especially when it comes from a good place, like somebody who likes what you're doing very much and would just want to see maybe something a bit different. I think thinking of like baking again is a good analogy. Somebody could have a really great recipe for some scones and they're delicious and it's thoughtful, but if it were only just a little bit not as dry, like just a little bit not so dry, and then it'd be perfect, right? And if you never say anything to the baker, then they're just making dry scones and no one says anything to them.
Yeah, exactly. So in this sense, we would be happy to hear all kinds of feedback. Luckily, we have quite a lot of friends in this sense, that different tea sommeliers, people from different shops, so on, which has been quite a good surprise for us in the beginning, because we come from a quite competitive industry beforehand. But coming into this world of tea, this has been very nice surprise for us, that people are actually really welcoming and supportive, and everyone seems to be very eager to help and talk. And if we have any questions, then there are always many people who want to help us. So in this sense, we are really surprised, and we feel really good in this tea community, and we're super happy that we have decided to go with this route.
Oh, that's lovely. Are you guys thinking of doing attending any tea festivals? I know there's quite a few tea festivals in Europe. Or any near you?
There are, but at the moment we don't have any specific plans, because the problem is that there's so many things to do, and so we would like to do all of it. We would like to go to shops and trainings and fairs and everything, but sometimes, and this is something that this life in Georgia and doing the farm in here has taught us a lot, is that sometimes you just cannot do all of it. You just have to take things step by step, and there is 7 of us, but still 7 is also a limit, and there's only 24 hours in the day, so sometimes you just have to deal with the fact that everything cannot be done. This was something that was quite difficult for us in the beginning, I know, but now we have learned to be more relaxed about it and understand that sometimes you just cannot. So this year we won't do fairs, I think.
But no, I think that's good. Like understanding like where you need some space, and things can come in time, but what you're really good at and what you're focusing on right now is teas and telling a story. And if anything compromises that, then you probably not the right time to do it.
Yeah, basically. So we just doing as much as we can, but also so that we won't get into this like stressed out stage again that we actually escaped from in the corporate. So just to keep ourselves happy as well, and to do it only as much as actually is enjoyable for us as well, so that we wouldn't wake up at some point thinking that, I have to go to the plantation. So if this happens, then we missed something along the way. But right now it seems that
steps back.
Then we have to again breathe a little bit and get back. But right now it seems that we have got to a good balance, in this sense that we have learned a lot how to be like a lot calmer in many things. This is something that I think the people of Georgia have been teaching us a lot, that sometimes you just do not have to stress about things that you cannot change anyways. So if there is only 7 of us and the day only has 24 hours, then that's what it is, and it's fine.
Yeah. I think that's really beautiful too, because when you consider, like you're saying at the beginning, you know, you're working with people who didn't see any movement or change in their village for 30 years and everything's still fine. Life kept going, you know,
exactly.
like, okay, you can take your time.
Yeah, exactly. This is something that I think that I have written in some of our blog posts as well, I think, or something.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something that is very actually confusing in the beginning, but really refreshing if you get the understanding of it. That for 30 years life was fine. Maybe maybe the house is not furnished to the best, or maybe like I don't have the biggest TV or the fanciest car, but it's fine. For the last 30 years, I have managed to live so that I do not have to go to work every day. And so why should I now? Actually, there is no reason. So the main point is there that you actually should just enjoy the life, and if the work is enjoyable, then you can do it. It's fine to get extra money, but you don't have to stress out too much about it. So valuable life lessons from Georgia.
Super valuable. Thanks, Georgia.
Yeah.
So I guess just to like kind of wrap up a little bit. So just so everyone knows, so they buy tea directly from you on your website. The shipping's pretty quick, actually, I found. What are, if anybody's curious, because I do notice that quite a few people, at least who are members of my program, they have small businesses themselves. So if somebody is interested to work with you, what teas do you currently have in like the largest quantity, and which tea do you currently have that's like the smallest production? You only have a little bit typically.
Well, basically we have quite even amount of black, green, and oolong tea at the moment. Of course, we have those different batches, like different names of the teas, but overall, all of the batches this year are about 3-4 kilos or something like that. So so we don't really have a concrete amount, or if we like talk about those wholesale options, then at the moment also we don't have like a fixed price list or a fixed system in it. So every deal is a little bit different, so to say, and everyone can just write to us, and then we will figure the things out as we go, because we don't have a specific idea at the moment about it. We just figure it out along the way.
Yeah, I think that's actually really awesome. I think more places I've seen are learning how to embrace that and tell that kind of story with their customers, that it's not the same tea all day, every week and month and year. Like, we have this one for a little while, and then when it sells out, we get this next one. And I think what's been really great is in the US, like the folks who work in specialty coffee, they've kind of planted that message already. They'll have a limited amount of a coffee and then it goes away. But something that's kind of similar, like it may still be a Kenya coffee, but it's a different one, right? So you could easily do that with this, where it's like, it's still a black tea and it's still in the style that you do, but it's a little bit different. You just update the description and it's fine.
Yeah, this is basically what we are aiming for. And also, for example, those teas like this lazy morning or banana rama or whatever, even like the batches, one batch of lazy morning is not the same as the second one. It's kind of the same. So that's why we have the batch numbers on the packages as well, because
the
there's
first thing on
several
the
batches.
is batch number.
Yeah, so all the time they taste like almost the same, but since we're not blending anything, then there's always some differences, because the only way to get like the exact same thing would be if you would make the whole spring flush, for example, and then blend it all together, then you can even it out. But since we are not doing that, then it's always just a little bit different. And I guess people just have to trust that it will always be still good.
Oh yeah. Like I ordered 2 of the sampler sets from you, and actually I wasn't anticipating that all 8 teas would be different. And so I opened it up, I'm like, oh, this is going to be nerdy. So I had to do like this big tasting of all of them, and I'm like, well, these are all really good. Like, I don't need them to be all the same, you know. It's really cool. So
really nice to hear. This is Warms our hearts.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story with us. Is there anything else that you would like to share with folks about what you're doing, what's going on in the fall? Any last note?
Any last words? No, I don't know. I just hope that people, if they like the story, then they can write to us. And always, if you write to us, then it will be probably me who will answer you and can share your thoughts about us or with what we should do or what we could do. And also come and visit Georgia. Georgia is
Yes,
a really nice place to visit.
do
And
tours.
at the moment, it's the best time because I think that probably in the next few years it will develop quite a lot in the direction of tourism. So right now, this year and next year are the best ones. It's still not ruined by the mass tourism. So come here and take a look of the Georgian life and us as well. Then, because we're always waiting for visitors.
Absolutely. That would be like the most incredible tea tour, because most of the time when you go on tea tours, it's hard to, even if you're in the garden with the plants, you're still not as up close as you could be because it's just separated by a bit of barrier of development and business formality. And it's not quite the same. Not quite the same.
Yeah, we are skipping the formalities. You can come and touch the leaves and see how factory things are going. So
that's amazing.
So yeah, everyone come and visit.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Miina. I hope we can have you again on the show, like maybe early next year or something during springtime, like when things are getting started, we could be out in the garden.
Yeah. Next time, we should try this outside part as well, because I'm a little bit sad that this time the weather is playing tricks, and also right now it's completely dark outside already. So
yeah,
couldn't show much in the garden. But yeah, next time we can show. There's always good to leave something for the next time.
Yes, always something for next time. Well, thank you so much again, and be in touch soon. Talk soon.
Yeah, and thank you for having us. It was really a pleasure to talk with you, and so nice to hear such a great words about our teas.
You're so welcome. Thanks for everything that you guys are doing. It's wonderful.
Yay! Thank you.
Take care. All right. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. Hope to see you next month for our next guest interview. And again, if you're interested in learning more about the Being Tea program and taking classes online, visit patreon.com/beingtea. Class levels start at just $5 a month, and you get new classes every single month. So it's a really great value, great community that we're building here with different conversation topics. So thanks again so much for joining, and I'll see you next time. Take care.